Welcome to the AV Huddle, the place for AV professionals to get the latest news, updates and stories from the leading commercial manufacturers and suppliers. Hear from end users while we dive into new technology, business strategy and innovative ways AV is shaping the sector. Let's jump into the Huddle.
Hi, good morning everybody and welcome to another edition of AV Huddle. And today we've got a special guest with us, Ryan from Airtame. But before we introduce Ryan, I'd like to also introduce our co-host, Louis. Louis, you want to give us a quick intro?
Hey guys, I'm Louis. I'm a network engineer here at AVM. Been working in the AV industry for roughly a year and a half now, and it's actually a new role to me. I work in integrating all the systems for our customers and ensuring it works on their client networks.
Thank you, Louis. So as I said, we've got a guest today, Ryan. So Ryan is a senior account manager across the UK. He's been in the AV industry for about 10 years, maybe more. I'm sure he'll tell us more about it. And he's part of Airtame, where they do wireless screen sharing and digital signage. Ryan, please fill yourself in a bit more. I know that's a very short intro, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what Airtame does, please.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys, and I really appreciate you inviting me into the call. So a bit about me and Airtame. So as you mentioned, I've been around for close to a decade in the AV industry. Working in certainly the similar sort of space of wireless screen sharing, digital signage. So it's really exciting for me to be part of Airtame. My role and responsibility here is to support our end customers and the partners that we work with. That's everything sort of pre-sales. In the old days before COVID was a lot of on-site sort of demos, things like that. Whereas now, obviously, we've had to adapt and change around that. So it's quite interesting to see how the market's sort of diversified and how we need to support customers very differently now to how we did maybe 6, 7, 8 months ago.
Oh, brilliant. So in terms of, how you are supporting customers, well, I guess the best thing for most of the listeners is, what problem is Airtame solving? So someone comes along and says, I've got this particular challenge. What would that look like?
A lot of the time it will change depending on the market sector. So if you to split everything down the middle, one being education, one being corporate, I'd say that the use cases tend to be slightly different. Okay. So one of our most recent projects was a private school just outside London. We'll be doing a case study on those guys, so keep an eye open for that. But they had a challenge in that they had a mixed estate of different technologies. So they had students who had iPads, they had Windows devices for their teachers, and of course that very quickly changed during the COVID situation. So they had to adapt the way that they delivered their messaging, the way that they were then even delivering their lessons, as an example. Okay. So the way that Airtame kind of fits in that space is being able to work completely agnostically. So a very unbiased approach to how you use technology in the classroom, and very similar with how you do it within the corporate space as well.
So you try and work with the current systems people have in place and adapt on them rather than try and enforce something entirely new. You'll try and build upon what they've already got.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, so you take, say, a tablet that a child's got or a teacher's got, and then they want to wirelessly present their information. It's where they would come along and use your software solution, I believe, and then plug it in and integrate and then share that. Is it simple as that? Have I made it too simple?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, again, trying to address that kind of use case is, we've got all these different clients who are using their different devices in very different ways, and a lot of people have previously been a case of, I don't want to download an app. I don't want to have to plug in a cable. I don't have to use a dongle, because of course their devices have changed as well. Yeah. When we talk about not only the different operating systems, but the physical connections required. Oh, yeah. Me myself, I've got a relatively new Lenovo laptop. Now that's got an HDMI connection on it, but my previous laptop was mini DisplayPort. That was a Windows device versus my colleagues who maybe had an Apple device. So of course, the physical connection is also an element here as well. So in terms of when users are looking for a solution, they also need to be mindful of, well, how do I get content from this laptop onto the display, and what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, that's interesting. And are you seeing kind of obviously with everything going on and with COVID, and kind of schools being forced to go back, and people need to adapt. How has that changed? Like, what are you hearing back from the market?
I think again it does change ever so slightly depending on the level of education. So anything sort of K-12 has been a case of people still back in the classroom, using devices slightly differently. Of course, even in classrooms, they're having to socially distance. So that has required people to use the technology differently. We're actually seeing people have a requirement for more displays in the classroom. So having that sort of amphitheater type approach. I heard a head teacher make a comment on a call previously, and they were looking for a solution that's maybe no cheap seats. So imagine like visiting the theatre.
Yeah.
In that not only the students but also anybody else that's in the classroom or meeting room should have the same experience. They shouldn't be restricted on the audio limitation or what screen visibility there is. So they're expanding the technology that they're using. The adding to maybe where they've got interactive touchscreens, they've maybe got repeater screens around the classroom. So really looking to actually deliver a better overall AV experience. So I think, for that to be top of mind and a key part of what education are looking to do at the moment is really exciting for us to be part of.
That's really interesting, actually, the way that the dynamics have changed in terms of they're not just looking at purely education, but they're looking at how people feel and making the experience around them a lot more, I'm trying to find the right word here, but a lot more personable, more about emotions and feelings and experience. I think maybe the experience is the right word. And that's just interesting. And they're using technology for this, which does make sense. Which really does make sense.
Absolutely. And one thing we can't ignore, of course, is the equality and diversity aspect here. We need to be inclusive within the AV space. Whatever setup people have within their organization, there needs to be a consistent flow. If somebody needs a different type of device, then it needs to be catered for. So that's really important for us to be part of.
No, that definitely makes sense. That definitely makes sense. And in terms of if there's like a school listening to this, or what was the other sectors you mentioned as well? Right, was it schools and
yeah, so
offices,
anything in the corporate space, anybody who's got a meeting room or an office space, whether it be a display or a projector, anywhere that you would not often go into a space and have a discussion, now has its own limitations in, of course, the health and safety element, but also the practical element of, actually, do I need to drive 3 hours to a meeting to then sit into a room for half an hour? So of course, it's the inclusion of the conference side of things as well. And it's been a key driver for the whole industry.
Yeah. So if someone is listening from, say, them two sectors, so let's say we're focusing on the school and the education sector, if somebody's listening to this, what would be something that you would say to them that will help them on their journey? Because if you've got a teacher, principal, or somebody, head of an academy, they're trying to get their school functioning and they're trying to increase productivity in education. You've obviously been talking to a lot of schools and you've been talking to a lot of teachers or decision makers from potentially the IT departments. What do you see coming across, which are common themes or questions that other listeners who'll be listening to this would feel actually that would be really useful for me to know about? Have you got something there you can share with them that would really help them on their, I guess, decision-making journey, or just giving them some thought pieces that they can think about? I never thought about using this technology, it can help me in this way, or actually, I've never heard about this problem, and only you've heard about it, Ryan, because you've spoken to somebody about this before. So, what could you share there that would really help somebody?
I think it's an approach that people take quite often, which is, not jumping into buying a solution. Of the feedback that we've been given, there's a high percentage, around about 38% of teachers directly who say that the reason why they don't use technology is because they don't know how to use it. If something requires a training session or something like that, it's going to fall back of mind. They're going to fall into their old ways of doing things. And I think that's where I think the opportunity is within AV, is that we need to continue to innovate and support our customers in that way. So for us, as I mentioned, in the fact that we can support across platforms, across operating systems, native protocols that people are familiar with using at home. Plenty of people now are familiar with using their smart TV with their mobile phone. That same concept still rolls into the corporate and education space, and people don't want to have to go on a training course. They don't want to have to use a separate control system or remember where the adapter was that they needed to use for this particular room in that particular instance.
Yeah.
They just want something that is uniform and completely unbiased across the estate.
Okay. So really, it's overcoming people's perception in terms of AV technology is complicated, but in this case, it's not. It's very simple.
Absolutely.
And again, as you mentioned, it's quite agnostic in terms of the hardware devices, which again makes life simple for them to use, and ultimately that increases productivity for them, which is useful. And then I guess taking that and then send questions to the workspace environment and the office environment. What would you say to anybody who's listening from that particular sector?
A similar sort of experience, really. In the many different meeting rooms that I've been in, they've all had a very dissimilar setup. You'd have a different kind of camera in one room. You'd have like maybe a dual screen setup in a different room. Maybe there's a bunch of cables and adapters laid out on the desk. And quite often when you find that you go into that room, the person that used it last has probably walked away with the dongle or the adapter that you then needed.
Yeah.
So of course, that's not only an experiential issue, but also an IT asset problem in that then they've got to oversupply for that need. Just because the nature of the way that people just tend to, like I say, walk away with dongles and what have you.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. In terms of, I guess, what you guys are doing then, do you have like multiple portfolio of products or services, or is it quite, you've just got one offering? What does it look like if somebody was to approach you and say, how many different things do you offer and provide?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So for us at the moment, the market space that we fit, we've kind of catered for everything that you're going to need in any eventuality. So whether or not you're working with a display or a projector, whether or not you're working within a divisible meeting room space where you want to be able to project to multiple displays simultaneously with the full audio and visual sync, as well as we now support interactive touchscreens as well. Now that's actually a recent firmware release that we've supported.
Okay.
So again, we've addressed that. We've had customers who've fed back to us direct. We require this feature. This would, support us in what we need to do going forward. So we've listened to them and we've implemented some of those key changes into our firmware.
I do have one question actually. So I was having a look at your website the other day, and we've already discussed that you do, wireless presentation and digital signage, but I noticed there's cloud management on there. Is that of your devices then? How does that work with Airtame?
Absolutely, yeah, good question. So our device management is all supported via Amazon Web Service. So that is virtually an unlimited feature, completely free. So as soon as you buy Airtame, all your device management is done via the cloud. Now that includes being able to update the firmware completely remotely, manage the IP addresses, any signage content as well. So for anybody in either the corporate or education space, at the moment what we're seeing is a transition whereby IT managers, service desk people are able to support their normal infrastructure quite well remotely, whether or not that be Windows, Apple, etc., from your day-to-day laptop use, versus the overall meter room technology that then has a slight disconnect in that, well, maybe if we don't have somebody on site in support all day every day as they used to be, then it's a case of, well, how do we anticipate if something's going to go wrong, and then we've got a need for some support on site. And that meets the AV world quite well, and that obviously we need to be able to support customers in that way. So the Airtame cloud management facility would be ideal for a customer in that situation.
Sounds
Absolutely,
interesting.
yeah.
So I guess I'm kind of running out of questions right now. Is there anything that you wish to say, just generally in terms of anybody listening to this, that maybe there's a question that nobody's asked you yet and you're dying for somebody to ask you a question? What would that be? Is there anything a message you want to push out to anybody?
I think as well, people have been anticipating different technologies, how things are adapting. There's a bit of consciousness around a fear of investment. Over the last sort of 6 or 7 months, it's been a case of people getting their devices up to speed. Certainly in business where it's been a case of, right, I've got people who are used to using the same tower PC for 5 years who have now got a laptop that they now have to work from home. It's about that that key change of when people inevitably will end up going back into the office, what does that then look like? What do I need to anticipate there? So there's all kinds of questions that are buzzing around within investors, certainly people in the IT space who are trying to understand what is the best way that I can position my assets. So of course, with that uncertainty comes a lot of questions, a lot of sort of risk potentially. So I think as well for us, we've invested a lot into demo units. So we're able to support customers who are going through that questioning period of, well, are we a Zoom house? Do we use Teams? What operating system do we want to use? If we're an education establishment, how do we use remote learning? What platform do we use in that space? All these questions are just continuously tying people in knots from what we're perceiving. Now, the peace of mind that we can offer is that being that we do work across platforms, if you do choose for any of those different solutions, you can still utilize Airtame as best as possible.
Would you say that's the main thing that separates Airtame away from other providers, that you can really integrate all these different systems together that people use? That's what you strive.
Absolutely. And again, with the support of the cloud management function as well, just given that complete peace of mind, if something were to go wrong, and in technology, it always does, you've got that fallback of being able to remotely update it and keep your meeting rooms going, keep your classrooms powered.
I think it's but it's a brilliant, amazing product and service because again, by offering a demo unit, everybody can get to understand it and play with it. Especially as you mentioned earlier, when you look at the education sector and people are a bit shy of technology, this gets them kind of over that hurdle where they can have a play with it, get familiar with it, and not worry about the hardware or the platform. And at the same time, you've also got the reassurance that actually you can still do firmware updates in the future. So they're always going to be that adaptability and that kind of the latest and the greatest offering for them. So it sounds like a kind of, why would you not use this? Essentially, it kind of boils down to that scenario. No, that's really, really interesting. Ryan, I think we're going to wrap up now. I was going to say, if anybody wanted to get in touch with yourself, learn more, ask you any questions, maybe even get hands on one of these demo units, what's the best way for somebody to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can head to airtame.com, nice and simple, and you can register your interest there. We have a ton of case studies, video tutorials that you can utilize there, or indeed feel free to reach out to me and the UK team, which is uk.sales at airtame.com, and we'll be happy to help you with your inquiries.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much, Ryan. And thank you, Louis, as well for co-hosting with us. And thank you to everybody who's been listening. So hopefully we'll see you next time. Cheers, guys. Thanks.
Thanks,
bye.
Thank you for listening to the AV Huddle. Don't forget to like, comment, follow, and subscribe to get the latest AV updates. AV Huddle, powered by AVM Solutions.